Back council, we hope you had a restful last Tuesday. Can I get approval on the minutes?
Second.
All right, minutes stand without objection. All right, council, if you look over your agenda session, we have no ordinances on final reading. We have 3 ordinances on first reading. If you have any questions or comments, please hit your light. We have resolutions under council office, economic development, fire, legal, mayor's office, public works, and purchasing and wastewater. So we have a lot of resolutions today. Are there any questions or comments? All right, I don't see any lights so far. All right, council, if you would take a look at your 2-week proposed agenda and hit your light if you have any questions.
I do, ma'am.
Go ahead and hit your light, council members.
It has to do, excuse me.
Councilman Ledford, would you hit your light?
All right, under finance,
Okay.
the 5-year capital improvement plan. Every year the council goes over that and then approves it, even though a council can only be bound for 1 year. And then Justin Steinman formally would make reports as requested by the council every quarter. For some reason, we overlooked that when we approved the budget. And I just need to know if council wants to go ahead and approve it singularly or not.
The 5-year.
5-year, so the capital projects are the biggest things that happen in the districts. And every year, separately approved is a 5-year capital improvement plan. And then we asked for quarterly reports on the plan we approved. We did get a report from Vicki when I called her attention to the fact, we just got it maybe for the last quarter. What we didn't do, because it was the last page of the notebook and it wasn't delineated, is we didn't approve the 5-year capital plan that would engender the reports that we get quarterly. It was an oversight on all our part. I think we were budgeted out. And all I want to know is, does the council wish to review that before the first vote on the budget? Because it's next week. It's easily cured. I just want to know what the council wants to do.
That'll be fine if you could bring it in our agenda session next week, because it's just a review, correct?
Well, I need to know, next week is the first reading of the budget. And if council wants to review it before the first reading,
All right, council,
that's all I want to know.
pleasure.
I think it would be a good idea to go over it.
Okay, go ahead, Councilman Henderson. I'm sorry, Councilman Ledford. Okay. Councilman Henderson, go ahead.
I think that it definitely should be reviewed. That is sort of we're saying this is our 5-year plan. It is a document of record, so yes.
All right. Go ahead. Yes, as well, okay. All right.
There is an item on is 7D for next week, which is the resolution adopting the 5-year capital improvement plan. If you don't have any, that's correct. So that's the question of when you would do that.
All right. All right, Councilman Ledford.
Madam Chair, this is an unrelated item I'd like to revisit, so if you want to close out this project.
All right, so it's a consensus to the council that we do want to have that reviewed, council members.
You can do it at agenda session if you want. If not,
Yes, that's fine. We can do it at agenda session next week. Is that okay?
yeah,
That's
that's
good.
cool, if that's what you guys want.
Okay.
It was an oversight, and if next week is the first vote, then we gotta review it.
All right, so
Thank you, ma'am.
we'll have that next week at agenda session. Any other questions about our 2-week agenda? All right, Councilman Ledford.
Thank you for the opportunity. I was waiting for Jermaine to pop in, and I saw that he has joined us. So going back to item F on the TIF policies and procedures, I have just a couple of clarifications if I can.
Sure.
Jermaine and Madam Chair, if you'll permit me. Some of the recommendations, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have covered these bases. So this could be hopefully a yes, no.
Okay.
We are adding stronger language to protect our school taxes from abatement at any turn.
Yes.
Right, that's good. We are acknowledging the community impact of the development, which means to me we are diving deeper into the actual benefit of the area for our citizens.
Yes.
And that seems to be, I think, a good step forward. The third-party review at the expense of the applicant, I think, is actually absolutely critical. And the credentials being required by that third party, I think we're using maybe a firm out of Knoxville is really versed in this.
Yes, that could change from TIF transaction to TIF application. But the language that the IDB recommended was for the use of that firm to not be optional, for it to be required, and for it to be at the expense of the applicant.
Okay, so that's no longer optional, but required.
Yes, sir.
That's great. The review committee, I understand we have 2 additional members. That's Gordon Parker and Althea Jones, I believe, rolled on yesterday from IDB.
Sure. So with each TIF, you all as the council get to select 2 people to serve on the application review committee. The IDB now would also like to have 2 people to serve on the committee, in addition to the mayor, who gets 2 people to serve on the committee. And then, of course, there's 1 representative from the chamber. So it brings it from a minimum 5-person committee to a minimum 7-person committee.
Very good. And we talked about the third party being required versus optional. The last item was, that's covered. That strengthens, to wrap that up with a nice little bow, that also will come into play when we ask my famous question, which is always but for.
Yes.
And I think that will help us quantify that question
Yes.
easily, so we don't necessarily, we should always ask it. I think it's good policy that we always ask it.
Yes.
But I feel like that we're covering those bases
We are.
more upfront. Am I
We are.
safe in saying that?
Yeah, and Knoxville, with regard to the third-party consultant, Knoxville has been using that consultant they've been using a consultant that has played that role for many, many years, is my understanding.
Okay,
So, yep, this is a good thing.
good. All right, thanks for covering the TIF policy changes that you're asking for approval tonight. Madam Chair, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilman Ledford. All right, any other questions on our 2-week agenda? All right, if you will take a look at your purchases, council, we have 4 purchases, 2 renewals, 1 RFP, 1 sole source, and 1 emergency purchase. Any questions or comments? All right, I don't see any lights. If you will take a look at future considerations. All right, Councilman Ledford.
Clerk, Madam Chair, can I get a little bit more I don't need it in the microphone, but before 6 o'clock on the biohazard cleanup on Veterans Bridge. We've had similar incidences in East Brainerd as well, and I'm trying to see if this is something that we need to keep an eye out for, but just before 6 is fine. I don't need a presentation on it.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Any other questions on future considerations or purchases? All right. All right, departmental reports. Today we will have a report from the Air Pollution Control Board. I thank you for your patience with us a couple of weeks ago. So if you want to come up and give your update.
Thank you. So good afternoon, Madam Chair and council members. My name is Ron Drew Miller. I'm the Executive Director for the Chattanooga Hamilton County Air Pollution Control Bureau. Today I'm here on behalf of the Air Pollution Control Board asking the council to adopt proposed revisions to the air pollution control regulations, which ultimately will be adopted by legislative bodies throughout the Hamilton County. And just note that these revisions have already been approved by the Hamilton County Board of Commissioners. The Air Pollution Control Board has the responsibility of recommending changes in the air pollution control regulations to the various legislative bodies in the county. These proposed changes to the air pollution control regulations were the subject of at least 30 days public comment and a public hearing before the Air Pollution Control Board. No adverse comments were received on the proposed revisions. The state of Tennessee requires that the air pollution control rules written all of Hamilton County be no less stringent than the state rules. Many of these rules have their origin as federal rules promulgated by the U.S. EPA. They are commonly adopted by reference by state and local jurisdictions to ensure national uniformity of rules and streamlining of state and local regulations, since many of them are extremely lengthy. The state recently updated the rules for new sources and sources of hazardous air pollution, and is requiring that our local rules be updated in order to be no less stringent than the state rules. These proposed changes include adopting new source performance standards for industrial sources of air pollution and national emission standards for hazardous air pollutants by reference of July 1st, 2021. Updating and adding some definitions, adding 3 additional chemicals to be excluded from the definition of volatile organic compounds, updating the list of chemicals for which they are national ambient air quality standards, adding electric e-notice provisions, updating stack testing requirements, asbestos regulations and fees, open burning rules, landfill rules, confidentiality provisions, making minor administrative changes and corrections and basic grammatical errors. And to the end, the Air Pollution Control Board unanimously recommends all of these revisions, has asked that the county and all of its municipalities enact them in order to maintain local jurisdiction over air pollution control. That's all I had.
All right, thank you so much. Are there any questions about the air pollution control ordinance update? Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. General question for you.
Yep.
So the Air Pollution Control Bureau has an enforcement component to it, other than not just reporting, but tracking, but enforcement as well?
Correct.
Can you talk a little bit about the enforcement side of what you do? And if someone were to see something that bothered them or seemed out of sort, what would they do?
Yeah, like for instance, I had to conduct a enforcement hearing this morning about a burning regulation and notice of violation. So a citizen can easily call us and say, hey, our neighbor or so-and-so is burning and something doesn't look right. So our investigator will go out and investigate. If a notice of violation is issued, then they will come see me for an enforcement hearing. I hear both sides of the story from my investigator and for the violator. At the end of that, then I enforce a civil penalty, which 60-40 split goes to the city and county. We don't get the civil penalty money, and then enforcement cost is just incurring the cost of the Bureau incurred during the investigative process for that violation.
So do you act as a AHO in some respect?
The board has given me approval to assess civil penalties up to $2,000 per day per violation.
$2,000 per day? Okay. What does, and I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads because I think we're all very interested in our air quality.
Sure.
What does the Air Pollution Control Bureau do on a regular basis to promote your services so that we're all aware and to be aware?
Yeah, so we have a text program that goes out for any type of awareness. We have the daily AQI report that goes out, which the news channels are aware of, and we're in line with the Division of Forestry as far as burning and or not burning. Every time I have an enforcement hearing, it's actually a learning experience, so I don't try to break the bank to get the point across, but just a little bit of sting so they understand the importance. So I tell them who we are and what we're all about and why we're here in the city and the county to cut down on the pollution and protect the air quality. So yeah, we try to do those type of things to get our name out.
So you address residential and commercial application?
Correct.
Okay, so if anyone had concerns or wants to know more, they can call your office, obviously.
Absolutely.
But is that a process that folks should be leery of or be afraid of in calling?
No, we're here to
Is
help.
it confidential?
No.
No, I mean,
Well,
if someone were to
someone's-
call and have a concern, I see this great amount of something happening over here. Can
That's
they
usually
remain anonymous?
That's usually in confidence. Yeah, we keep it confidential. If someone's saying, hey, my neighbor is burning, then we don't if the violator comes in, hey, who told you that I was burning? And we don't want to reveal who the person was calling.
Last question, Madam Chair, and this, do you follow up with the person that may have filed a concern to let them know what you found? Or does it just kind of, a lot of times we find that when we try to be involved in something like this, we never find out what actually ever happened, and I feel like
Yeah. I'll give you a scenario what happened recently.
That link is not always solid there.
A neighbor called our investigator and said, this person is running their diesel truck for an hour next to me. And so my investigator went over there and talked to the violator, fixed the situation, and then got back with the neighbor that complained. And the neighbor actually called me to thank me how good of a job our investigator did, because that would happen multiple times. So yes, there's times where we reach back out to the person that kind of reached out to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll follow up with some more questions.
Sure.
But I really think that this is great. I appreciate you coming today, and I apologize too for you having to come back. But
It's okay.
I think this is real important as far as creating a better place for all of us to live, that we learn more about what you all do.
Absolutely.
I really do, so
I
thank you.
appreciate that, yeah.
All right, Madam Chair,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilman Ledford. I learned a lot in that questioning too. That was good information. Any other questions from council? All right, thank you. All right, with that ends our agenda session. Committee today, we have planning and zoning, and we do not have an attorney-client privilege meeting today. I'll turn it over to Councilman Ledford.
All right. This might take 2 trips, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. This is familiar. Welcome to Planning and Zoning for June 6th. I will take a motion on the minutes, please. All right, minutes have been motioned and seconded, and they will stand without objection. So today, we have several cases. I think most of them are in District 6. Dr. Burrs?
Busy place.
Very busy place this month, and also District 8, and I believe we have one in District 9. Just a moment, I'll pull up my notes here. So we have ordinances on first reading. We have 2 ordinances on final reading. Let me cover in your packet case 0037, 0049. Those are on final reads. Any comments or questions? We need to cover those.
Not on final reading. Huh? Not on final reading, first reading.
First reading?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Some of my notes are a little bit backwards then. So, Councilwoman Burrs, if I may, we have some cases that we need some information on that have been floating out there for a while. And if you don't mind, I would like to tackle those first.
I can get rid of this first one real fast.
Okay, so
There's nothing to say about it. Everybody's in agreement.
would you give me that case number, please, that we'll be discussing?
0037.
0037,
Alternate version.
alternate version?
Yeah,
Okay.
all we did with everybody's agreement is include mostly what was already in the law as conditions.
Hit your light for me. We can get that on.
Yes? It's disabled. It's still disabled.
Let me clear the queue.
It still says. Working.
Hit your light for me once more, Dr. Burrs.
Now it's on.
How is that?
Yeah, it's
Okay,
good.
great, thank you.
Yeah, so at city attorney's recommendation, we just came up with an alternate version
Okay.
that included everything, and to my knowledge, everybody's good to go. I'm
Okay.
finished.
There you go. Case
Okay.
0037, we will mark that
Five
one.
conditions to it.
You want to read those conditions for me?
Yes, sir. The conditions are use as a wholesale lumber yard and related merchandise sale only. Access is to be through Eblin Drive or Ocoee Street only. Exterior spotlighting or other illumination of non-residential uses or structures shall be directed down and away from residential zones or uses per section 3833 of the Chattanooga zoning regulations. A 6-foot-tall side obscuring fence to be installed along the shared southern property line abutting Hamilton County Tax Map Parcels 139AC, 003, 004, and 005, and a Type A 30-foot landscape buffer to be installed along the shared southern property line abutting Hamilton County Tax Map Parcels 139AC, 03, 4, 5, per the requirements of Section 38595 of the Chattanooga zoning regulations. Simple.
Thank you, sir. 0037 is complete. Let's move into item D, which was added by Madam Chair. And that's in District 8.
Yes, sir.
Councilwoman Knoll, do you have anything you need to add to that case? I see that it's been deferred, and we have a planning version 2.
Yes,
Okay,
a planning version that we will, with conditions.
okay.
So I'm gonna rely on my council family and attorney, Phil, to walk me through that.
Yes, there's an alternate version here as well that goes from, I guess, from M1 manufacturing zone to RTZ instead of R2 residential zone. And the RTZ is also subject to the following condition: no more than 2 single-family detached dwellings with accessory dwelling units. The accessory dwelling unit is not required.
That's it.
Very good. Good?
Good.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to follow our agenda, a little different than my notes on my screen, so we'll move into the resolutions. Councilman Henderson, have anything you'd like to add on the Mountain Creek Corridor study, sir?
No, I think we could go around.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, now moving into ordinances on first reading. Dr. Burrs, we are back to you in District 6. If you don't mind, I'd love for us to address 0262 and 0263. And I have a feeling you're probably going to want a full presentation, so if you'll take the mic.
Yes, sir.
Then I will defer to you, ma'am.
Okay, both of these cases have had much discussion, many meetings, and what I would like is the council to see, because there may be a lot of energy and activity next week at the meeting, is for them to see and hear, and for the record, what is now being presented.
Okay. Good afternoon, Karen.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good, thank you.
And now we'll get started once it starts.
All the money we've spent.
Okay, the first case is 2022-262. It's a request to rezone 7707 Lee Highway from C2 Convenience Commercial Zone to UGC Urban General Commercial Zone to develop 94 housing units in an existing hotel building. So this case and the next case on the agenda, which is case 263, 2022-263, are next to each other on Lee Highway, and most discussion on this case carries over to the other except for a few minor details. So I will kind of cover everything in this presentation, then just touch on the differences with the next case. The property is 2.29 acres. The proposal is 94 units. The property is zoned C2, as is much of the surrounding property. That's shown in red on the map on Lee Highway, all the way to Bonnie Oaks Drive. The R1 yellow, the zoning shown in light yellow is the R1 residential zone, and some of the opposition live in that area, so just wanted to highlight that. Actually, there have been 3 cases in the immediate area, all related to 7725 Lee Highway, which is in the UGC zone, shown 2 properties away from this. There's a mandatory referral case in 21 for the acquisition of property for supportive and transitional housing by the city. In 2022, a request to surplus property to advertise through the RFP process to develop the site for affordable housing. And case 2022-201 was a request to rezone 7725 Lee Highway from C2 to UGC to develop an existing hotels and affordable housing units. That rezoning was approved by council in November of 22, and that UGC is shown on the map as that pink-gray crosshatch, which is a little bit hard to see on the map. The C2 convenience zone, the current zone, has a maximum density of approximately 18 dwelling units an acre, and this is based on a calculation in the zone based on square footage, but it's roughly 18 units an acre. The existing structure contains 94 rooms. So based on the lot size and the existing C2 density requirements, a total of 70 rooms can be converted to permanent housing on the site. So the UGC zone allows for higher density than the C2 zone. So the current zoning allows by right 70 rooms. The UGC zone would allow the 94 rooms that are existing on site to be converted from hotel rooms to multifamily. There's been no recent zoning history for this exact property, but the next case on your agenda, which is case 2022-263, is shown on the map just immediately abutting the site to the northeast. And so the mix of uses, as you know, there's several motels, there's commercial and vacant under construction, and I believe that's for a motel also. The Shalford Road Lee Highway Area Plan recommends a heavy business mix for the site. This is defined as convenience commercial, neighborhood commercial, regional serving, planned commerce, offices, high-density residential, light industry, warehouse, wholesale, or similar uses. So a pretty robust mix of uses for the site. The proposed UGC zone would allow uses are outlined in the Shalford Road Lee Highway Area Plan. The UGC zone allows an urban development form, however, the proposal is to reuse the existing structure. Staff found that the request is compatible. The zoning request is compatible with the Shalford Road Lee Highway Area Plan and surrounding uses, and staff recommended approval. There was opposition at Planning Commission, and the case materials provided by RPA to council have a zoning petition in there and quite a few pages of that zoning petition with quite a few numbers. Number of people signing. Planning Commission found the request is compatible with the adopted plan, adjacent land uses and development form, and this comes with a Planning Commission recommendation to approve the urban general commercial zone. And I can touch briefly on the differences of of the next case, which is just a case of numbers, and then we can talk about the additional information. So 2023-263, which is the property between this site and the one that the city went through the zoning process for, the only thing I'm going to mention here that's different is that based on the lot size and existing C2 density, a total of 56 rooms could be converted to permanent housing, and the existing structure contains 64 rooms. So 8 rooms difference that is this change to UGC would allow based on what is proposed. So the only thing different being the allowed number under zoning versus what they were requesting to do under the UGC zone. And then loaded some slides that the applicant provided. I believe they've shared this with the community. And I will defer to Councilman Burrs, but I think ultimately end on some proposed conditions. These show proposed zoning.
Karen?
Yes.
I think the only people in the world that haven't seen this is
Okay,
council.
yeah, I can go
So
through slowly, and I
if you
believe
could
these are
just
looking towards
explain
the
them
site.
quickly but briefly, because it's a gorgeous plan. So if you could do that.
Sure. I believe these are looking towards the site. The applicant here, I believe, is showing the distance between buildings and the proximity to, from the nearby homes to the proposed conversion, their existing hotels. Their calls for service, I think, was discussed by the community, and the applicant might speak a little bit more to the nuances. 7707, the next case has kind of similar numbers. The developer was showing some comparable conversion development in Nashville. And then renderings. And I think this is something, my understanding is that the applicant shared with the community, or the improvements or changes made with the conversion to permanent housing. And I spoke to the applicant this morning, and they are proposing zoning conditions. My understanding is they've met with the interested community members and proposed these in mid-May. And the applicant conveyed that he has not heard back. He's understood they were going to be shared. He shared them with everyone he had a email address with, but he hasn't heard back. But these are the proposed conditions the applicant is, because right now it comes with a planning commission recommendation to approve UGC, and the applicant is proposing to add these conditions.
So if I may, Mr. Chair.
Ma'am, please.
So there have been numerous meetings about this and lots of input from the community and a great deal of input from people who don't live in the community. And if you'd go back to the pictures, please. These are not going to be low rent facilities. They're going to be very nice. What we would do is tie the development to this, not sort of kind of looks like this, but tie it to this. There are, and I'll have to correct me, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. So it's not what everything started out to be. It's going to be much higher end. The community's seen this. We're not showing you anything that the community hasn't seen. The community was asked for, to get back to the developer. I was not part of the meetings. I was sitting back listening, and then made sure that the developer took in all the things the community wanted, and he did. The only thing that is not included here as a condition, and I'm not sure it can be, Phil, there is a worthy cause got presented to the community, and there were a number of meetings which you all attended, and the city agrees that the presentation for the city's project could have been better. So there was a lot of that coming through this again, and one of the things had to do with can they make sure that the city doesn't have any part of these projects? And the only thing I could come up with is a reverter clause or a right of reversion. I don't know what else.
I mean, that could be added to the deed in connection with that, at least a reversion if the city was involved. But normally, conditions would not be applicable. The city would not have to
Well,
comply
they
with
were
it.
assured by everyone there that this wasn't the city doing something. This was more the people that lived outside the city talking. But city wasn't going to doing something subterfuge. And so I just want you to know that that could come up next week. I'm not asking for it now,
Right,
but just please know that that may come up,
okay.
all right? What we were thinking, Mr. Chair, is, and what the city attorney advised and what Karen has suggested is all of this, the conditions and everything, be included in what is being proposed next week.
Would that come in the form of an alternate version to what is on the agenda currently? I feel like it's the cleanest way to do that.
Yeah, I'm good with whatever,
Sure.
You want to do it that way, Phil? I'm fine with that. And this covers everything, every concern I know of. That doesn't mean other things won't be brought up. Everyone in the world has participated except council. So I thought it might be a good idea for you all to see the truth of what's being proposed.
Okay.
Mr. Price is here if you have any questions. I'm not sure what else.
I'm not seeing any lights, Dr. Burrs, but I have a question, maybe for Mr. Price, if I can. Karen, can you go back a few slides where it shows the overview of the land as is currently? Go back one more or two. Close up. One more maybe. I'm trying to get to the bird's eye view. The land that is still wooded is my question. Is there any intent to encroach onto that? I look at that as a major buffer. Is there any intent to get into that wooded area that we're seeing now? Yeah, we need to get that on the record, please. The question and the answer. Because the concerns, I think, from the residents obviously is a lot of buffer. And I think I saw something about a 30-foot buffer, but I'm seeing a lot more than 30 feet.
Correct. So, Councilman, there is by requirement by the zoning ordinance that there be a 30-foot buffer adjacent to the residential. So by de facto, we call that out as being a minimum to be provided. There are several utilities, especially sewer, that run apparently from the current hotel sites to a sewer main that is on the other side of the creek. We did hear from the last meeting that apparently that sewer clogs from time to time, and there may need to be some sort of work done to that, which would be in that buffer area. There is no intent or proposal to develop along and through there in the back. I would also state that there's a 60-foot water quality buffer that runs along that creek that is also, even though it's not spelled out as a zoning requirement, it is a development standard that we have here in the city and in the state. So
Is that waters of the state?
it is waters of the state, yes, sir. So given that, there's quite a buffer, but there may be a need to get into it simply to take care of some utilities that need some work. But other than that, there's no development plans currently that I'm aware of to do anything else.
So the intent is to do repair work with minimal disturbance of the current wooded area?
Correct. And the way that the city regulations work is if we disturb the buffer, we have to go back and replant and revegetate areas in through there. So even if there were disturbance, it's not like it's going to be left as a grass strip, if you will, that would punch through and create a vista where people could see into the development. We'd have to plant back. So
Is that an LDO oversight or TDEC?
it's really more of LDO than it is TDEC.
Okay. And I say that because of waters of the state.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's the only question I had, Dr. Burrs, at this
I
point.
have one follow-up. How far back does your property go into those woods?
So the
It could go to the
overall,
woods.
if you look at the screen here, so of course there's two different sites. So if you look at the site to the south, which is closest to the intersection, we go back roughly about 200 feet from the rear of the building to the rear property line, thereabouts.
And then how much further is it to the creek?
That is basically where the creek is in.
So you go back to the creek?
We do, and actually, and I think one area we own actually a little bit on the other side of the creek, but more or less the creek is somewhat the boundary line there in the rear.
And Mike, I would add a condition that you not develop back there.
Okay.
Okay? However, that needs to be worded so that people can be assured, since their property line goes all the way back there.
We need to have some sort of distance in addition to the 30 feet that is at least stated in
That
here.
no other property will be divided from the back of the existing building to the creek. Because you would have the right to do it, right?
Currently, we would have the right, yes, ma'am. So what I would
Yeah.
suggest is, if I might, that we could present a drawing to RPA to come on the agenda for next week that would show a area to be left undisturbed except for utility work. And then that.
Oh, yeah. I don't have a problem with the utility work. You've got enough land where you could add to your building back there.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's what I don't want to happen. So however that needs to be worded, let's do that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Burrs, if I may interject on that, Thursday by close of business, according to our new state laws, we need to have that in.
We will have it by tomorrow.
That's the way to do it.
And if you would just get it to council so that they will all see it.
Sure, and I'll also forward it to those individuals whose email that I have so that they're aware of that as well.
That's fine, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm good.
Anything else, Dr. Burrs?
No, sir.
Okay. Karen, thank you. I'm going to clear the queue. Councilwoman Knoll, that was an older light, I believe, ma'am?
It was.
Thank you. I'm going to skip over 6.3, and we're going to keep you in the hot seat, Dr. Burrs, for case number 0068.
Okay. This is a request to lift and amend conditions of a prior city council ordinance. There was quite a bit of opposition to this case at Planning Commission, and a lot of emails regarding it. The property is in the 5200 block of Hunter Road, and it's currently zoned C2 with conditions. So this is right at Hilltop and the intersection at Lee Highway off 75. And I'm just going to start with RPA's observation is that from the input was that this is a case about rezoning this property commercial, or this is about this property getting approval to build apartments. And so I just want to be clear, and if we hear this case at council next week, I will try to clarify that too. We've tried to be clear that the proposed use for the site, which is apartment and then a mix of other uses, are already allowed by the zoning. The apartments actually, in particular, are allowed by the zoning. So I think that we've made the point at Planning Commission, but just to be clear, and I'm going to go quickly to the site plan just to kind of clarify the site plan. The site plan showing apartments to the kind of the northeast of the site, the northwest and west of the site, and then there's a future development area. But I think this is what is triggering the thought that council's acting on apartments here. But that's not the case. For some history, a portion of the site was zoned from A1 to C2 with conditions in 2012 by County Commission. The property was annexed into the city of Chattanooga, and in 2013, there was a case to rezone properties to establish permanent zones. It's very similar to the case on Clark Road that's on council's agenda, which is temporary to permanent zones. The request was approved subject to conditions by city council, that permanent zone with conditions through ordinance 12703. And the applicant is requesting to amend and lift conditions from that ordinance. So the conditions put in place by County Commission were carried over during council action on the permanent zone. So generally, whatever the zone is in the unincorporated county, if annexed, we try to kind of find the companion zone in the city zoning ordinance. In that case, those conditions carried over. There's a mix of uses in the area. There's a daycare just to the north of the site, a single-family residential, a lot of vacant land, some commercial development. Wolf-Tevye Creek is to the east of the site, and then I-75. To make it, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. The applicant's request, there's 11 conditions. The applicant requested a mix of changes, amending 2 related to use, not recommending any change related to adult-oriented establishments, liquor stores, or winery prohibitions. And then conditions 6 through 11 were related to traffic operations. So I think it'd be perhaps best handled through discussing the staff recommendation, which was the staff found the request is compatible with the Wolf-Tevye Creek area plans surrounding land uses and development form. And staff recommending amending condition number 1 and 2. The revised condition would say no restaurants or other establishments serving food or beverage except for that future development site. And again, you kind of see it highlighted in red, the portion of the site that's that future development site. So not the entirety of the site, just that area would be reserved to have the ability to have restaurants and other establishments, the same for hotels and motels. And that's kind of following the site plan, which shows apartments for much of the site, and then this kind of future development area. So no change requested for adult-oriented establishments, no change to liquor stores or wineries, all still prohibited. Conditions 6 through 10 are related to a variety of things, deceleration, traffic operational type issues. Staff recommended approving those conditions and recommending denying lifting the deceleration lane at the easternmost entrance. Let me make sure I phrase that correctly. Staff approved 6 through 10, lifting 6 through 10, the traffic operational ones at 6 through 10, and recommended keeping that deceleration lane. However, staff recommended to replace those traffic operational conditions with a new condition, which is signalization of intersection at Hilltop Drive and Hunter Road as is required unless otherwise determined by the City of Chattanooga Public Works Transportation Division. And so I'm using the term replacing 6 through 10 with this condition. And then I'll note the Planning Commission revised the condition related to deceleration lanes, and they recommended, and the Planning Commission recommendation comes from deceleration lanes to be provided at both entrances. So there's a chunk of conditions that are being lifted, but they're being replaced with a more holistic condition related to signalization, and the deceleration lane has been amplified to both entrances instead of just one entrance. So there was opposition present at Planning Commission. Traffic safety concerns, quite a bit of discussion on safety on Hunter Road. Concerns about the apartments. Again, trying to stress to community members there that it's not about the apartments, and then dangerous curves on Hunter Road. Planning Commission determined the request is compatible with adopted plan, development form, and adjacent land uses, recommends amending the those two use conditions we talked about, lifting that chunk of traffic operations condition, and amending the deceleration lane condition to be required that be provided at both entrances. So just kind of replacing traffic operational conditions with some updated conditions. And we did work with our partners at CDOT on that, but I would defer to Ben if he has. I'm using the term replace, that's my term. If Ben has anything else, he's certainly welcome to speak to that. So in summary, the new conditions will read as follows, shown on the screen to make it easy, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Dr. Burrs.
Yeah, this again is a project that has a lot of energy about it. The main issues, people were not quite understanding that this was not a rezoning.
Right.
And the energy should be and was placed on the safety conditions. And so what I'm understanding you did was, with the help of Councilman Ledford, who also talked to the people and assured that they would be safe. We took all the other verbiage and added the signalization and the deceleration lanes, which, as I understand it, met the safety concerns of the people.
So that Planning Commission, Dr. Burrs, if that's a lead into follow up on, that is a road that I had stated in that meeting. I travel actually quite regularly, and I'm aware of the conditions there. I think the decel lane on the second entrance is a safety concern that we can mitigate right now, and I think it should be in the plan. And I appreciate the applicant working with me to put that condition in. Not knowing what CDOT has moving forward, I do think as you are traveling Hunter Road towards 75 at the intersection of Harrison and Ottawa, and again, I travel this road very frequently, there needs to be some sort of indicator that there is a traffic light around the corner. And I think that we would be very well served in looking at that option. That is a suggestion that is probably, I I don't speak for CDOT, but I travel that road, and I think it would be a very good way to assure that we are looking out for the safety and the well-being of
So you'd
anybody
like
who travels
added
there.
another condition, the flashing light added?
Well, I'm gonna lean on CDOT, Dr. Burrs, to make that determination, but if, I personally think it would, to see that, I would like to see that. Something that says, hey, pay attention. That is a very, kind of snaky road right there, and as you head down that hill, speed is something that, I have noticed, many, many times, just taking it too fast, and I think anything that warns you and gets your attention is a win for everyone. So that is a
Ben?
suggestion.
Can we have a flashing
Does that sum
light?
up?
Thank you. Okay, done.
Okay.
All right. Let's make sure that's in there as well. I already got the thumbs up.
I saw the thumbs up as well, so
right.
I think that's another step towards.
Is there anything else that gives you discomfort?
No, ma'am. As you've clearly stated, and Karen has clearly stated, this was not a rezoning case, and that was a big confusion at the time that this was a rezoning for apartments. That zoning has been in place for many, many years.
Yeah.
It was about conditions that were assigned to an older project that does not exist anymore, and these conditions were to the project that is being proposed. Am I right,
That's
Karen, on that?
correct,
Okay.
yes. And we showed the prior site plan, which kind of showed a standard commercial strip-type development, kind of
Right.
big box. And
Big
so
box,
that's
right.
no longer the proposal, but those conditions went right with an older case, yes.
Can we get a condition to add some sidewalks in District 2? Or add it? I need some.
Let me get through these two. So
This is
I
local
don't
government,
think,
not federal government.
so Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for your help
Yep.
with this. And I think with that, we've met all the needs of the folks. Again, I wanted a complete presentation because the only people who haven't been part of all of this is the council. I thought my colleagues deserved to know that everything's been addressed and it may be spirited next week. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Yeah, right.
All right, Karen, I am seeing our next case with opposition as 6-6. You're already there. And
Correct.
we are moving into District 8 now. Councilwoman, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a request to rezone 1130 East 14th Street from R3 Residential Zone to UGC Urban General Commercial Zone with conditions. The applicant provided some conditions to develop 4 attached units. There is no recent rezoning history for the site, but there have been several rezonings to UGC in the area. Kind of see that as the red crosshatched, including a 2016 and 2022 case abutting this property on Main Street. Surrounding land uses are a mix of single-family residences, manufacturing, commercial, mixed-use, duplexes, vacant property with the National Cemetery a couple blocks to the north. We've had quite a bit of activity in rezoning in the kind of the greater Main Street area, and then between Main Street and East 13th Street and the National Cemetery. On this block, there's a mix of a single-unit residence next door. There's offices and industrial uses on the block. This is the site. The Area 3 Historic River to Ridge Plan recommends mixed residential place type for the site, and that's intended to provide a wide range of housing options and kind of close to walkable destinations. It includes moderate to higher intensity housing options at densities that support transit and other neighborhood-serving businesses. The proposed UGC zone, and I think I say this every time in cases like this, it could introduce potential nuisance uses and incompatible development. Remember that UGC zone is a tool we're using for urban residential infill, but so we often recommend conditions limiting out some of those commercial uses. So staff did recommend conditions relating to use and height in order to ensure compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood and support the plan recommendation. There was opposition present. There was a gentleman, I believe he owns the office next door to the site. He thought that 3 stories was too high. He thought the development needs to match 14th Street. I think he was thinking the proposed development form was more similar to Main Street, and we're 1 block off Main Street here. and just concerned about the loss of view. Planning Commission determined that, similar to staff, that the request is compatible with the plan and uses in the area, and is giving a recommendation to approve with condition for residential uses only and maximum building height of 3 stories.
Councilwoman Knoll, if you'll hit your light for me, thank you, ma'am, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have not gone by the site to look at it, but no one has actually reached out to me in opposition of. So as I always do, I like to go out and at least knock on a couple of doors or areas and see what people's thoughts are to make sure they know what is going to happen or what is trying to be done there.
Any other questions?
No, I'm good.
Council, any
Thank you.
questions on item I? All right, Karen, we will move into our next case with opposition 0065.
So I think on the rundown, I've mentioned that this case had opposition at Planning Commission. We actually had an email that was read at Planning Commission. So just to clarify, I don't think we had anyone present at Planning Commission. This is 2519 Bailey Avenue, rezoning from R2 residential zone to UGC with conditions to develop multi-unit residential with 14 units and 4 stories. And then the proposed condition was just related to residential use only. The site is one Macaulay School is on the eastern side of Dodds there, just to help you orient. The site's surrounded primarily by single-family residential land uses with 2 family, multifamily uses in the area. There are commercial uses. They're shown there as kind of office right at the corner of Bailey and Dodds. And again, Macaulay School is that kind of starting that large green field on the other side of Dodds. The site is neighboring commercial zones and uses at the intersection of Bailey and Dodds. And staff felt that the UGC zone with conditions can serve as a transitional zone between the commercial uses at the corner of Dodds, heading more to the interior of the community with that residential zone. This is the site. This is looking kind of away from Dodds, down Bailey Avenue. And there's a mix of single-family, 2-family, and multifamily on this portion of Bailey Avenue. And then looking towards Dodds, this is the corner of Dodds and Bailey, and this is an office use in that commercial zone. So the Area 3 Historic River to Ridge Plan recommends an urban residential place type for the site. It's intended, this use is intended to act as a transition between single-family housing and commercial districts. It supports a range of housing types. And again, noting that that UGC zone can have some uses in it that can be a nuisance to the residential neighborhood. So staff recommended conditions related to use, form, and height to ensure compatibility. And that included residential uses only, maximum building height of 2.5 stories or 35 feet, and parking not being accessed from the primary street. And this is trying to help with compatibility and the staff, the plan recommendation. And then this does have an alley to the side and rear of it, which is that reflected in that third condition. The email in opposition was talking about this property remaining single family, concerned about the loss of the alley or use of the alley. Planning Commission determined the request is compatible with adopted plan and land uses and recommended approval with those 3 conditions similar to staff. I highlighted condition number 2 in blue. I'd received an email from Councilman Coonrod that asked to add a condition to have a 4th floor. So the original, a 4th, I think, story or floor. The original proposal was for 4 stories. Staff felt that for compatibility, dropping the height would be more compatible. Understood from the email that the applicant and Councilman Coonrod were able to meet and that a 4th story was appropriate. So I responded that I would note that she supported that, and the condition number 2 shown here would need to be amended to something like maximum building height of 4 stories in order to implement her support of that.
Karen, I have a question on
Yes.
this case. Do you know if there's any conversation, in UGC, you do not have to have a 500-foot requirement to sell alcohol. This is 500 feet or closer to Macaulay School. And there is no condition, and I think that we can by law, until we're challenged or told not to, condition UGC to not allow alcohol. Was that brought up at all as any part of this conversation?
We have had some discussion with the city attorney about the UGC and the requirements. And I guess I think of them as two different, I guess I think of it as two ways. The UGC zone established here would not allow a liquor store because it's conditioned to residential uses only. So there's no
Okay.
bar, beer sales, liquor stores. However, you're correct.
Okay.
And that there is no distance requirement from a UGC. So so I think there's two, what is happening in the zone itself,
Right.
and what is that zone impacting? And we have tried to keep the UGCs, most, not all, and we have a rundown report that I can do a summary of and send to council. Most of those infill uses, we've been pretty consistent with a condition of residential use only.
Do you think, and I see Councilwoman, Madam Vice Chair's light, because I'm sure she's got a great question ready for us on this. Do you think that it is helpful to us when we identify something as residential only, that we kind of have a list of things on the commercial side so that people, when they read the condition, for example, residential use only to you and I may trigger that thought, but it won't trigger that thought with a next door neighbor or someone who just reading it, that they think, well, I read UGC, alcohol is allowed or not, does not cover the 500-foot parameter. Is there a way, I think communication is always key, to let people know that that residential use only kind of knocks out, if you will, the commercial use altogether. And if I'm correct on that.
What is R4?
Pardon?
What is R4?
R4 special zone?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it, I'm not sure of the question. Is it is it a residential zone
Yes.
or is it a special zone or
Correct.
commercial zone?
Yes.
I think it is a hybrid, and we talked about this recently with Camiris and zoning code, was what kind of zone is it? But it's kind of it allows that range of uses. So we can, to your point, oftentimes the applicant, and several of these, the applicant has requested zoning with conditions, and offering the residential use only. I think most of our applicants understand that that's part of the UGC being used for urban residential infill. We could make a point when that is done to add on to the yellow zoning sign that it is a zoning to UGC residential use only, and that might help with the understanding of, okay, if I look at UGC, but that might just be a trigger, but because we have so many people proposing that, we could just start adding that to the sign when that is when an applicant offers that condition from the beginning.
Great effort. I think that would help tremendously. Yeah, thank you. Madam Vice Chair?
Thank you. So, in keeping with the theme of this conversation about residential use only, what it is and isn't, now that we have officially adopted the new short-term vacation rental ordinance, UGC would typically be one that would allow short-term vacation rentals. And Phil, I'd like to understand from you if we have clarity under the law when we say residential uses only.
Good question.
Is that clarity enough to say that this is a long-term rental or permanent residence versus a short-term residence? Or do we, when we condition, if we want to condition that, do we need to use different language?
I think that you need to include language that would indicate that it would be not used for short-term vacation rentals if that's your intent
Okay.
for residential uses
So we
only.
we would need to add another condition that specifically says not for XYZ.
Except
And-
for persons that were actually staying in the home at the time. I guess that could be the other question. Is an absentee short-term vacation rental prohibited by residential uses only, which I think is probably your intent.
Right, well, that's my intent of, understanding how one
Yes.
might condition that if one,
If it's
Felt
a
like that was
homestay, it
appropriate.
might not be, yes.
yeah, okay. All
Yes.
right, that's helpful, thank you very much. And that's, Councilwoman Coonrod may have feelings one way or the other, I don't know.
That's
Thank
true.
you.
Great question, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you for that. Council, I'm seeing no other lights on case 0065. Yes, Dr. Burgess? I see your light as soon as I said that.
Yeah, for some reason, G on next week's agenda was not listed on your list.
I have G, ma'am, and I have a case that had no opposition at Planning Commission, so we did not cover that one. If
Okay.
you'd like to cover it, I'm more than happy.
It doesn't need covering. I've not heard from the applicants. I know they're regularly told. I have no idea what it's about. And so in all likelihood, I'll be deferring next week.
I would anticipate
Thank
that
you.
from you. Thank you, ma'am. Karen, I'm seeing no other lights on 0065. We have a special exceptions permit, speaking of liquor stores, in District 6 this evening. Any other items you need to cover with us this afternoon?
I don't unless you have any questions.
Counselor, is there any other cases you would like to cover this afternoon? We've covered all the cases with opposition. We've had an opportunity to talk about our Mountain Creek Road study. Madam Chair, do we have any other business before this council before we adjourn till 6? Then we are adjourned till